Hi, hello, this is Esmeralda. Welcome to my YouTube video today. Today I actually wanted to talk about a book club that I actually joined last year. So I do follow a couple of times Peter Mon online on YouTube, and he actually does a lot of like pretty much true crime, murder mystery, that kind of stuff, right? Which I'm really into. So I do follow him, and sometimes I read the books that he puts up there with his pretty much like the co-host Mel. So I've been enjoying that. But I also joined a book club, a personal book club of mine, and I was offered an opportunity to join this book club. One of my husband's aunts, which she's technically my goddaughter's mom. So we're a lot more closer, and yeah, so these wonderful women were going to try to get together and make a book club. So it was her amongst other aunts that my husband has, and they are amazing. They love books and everything. So I was really, really excited when I got invited to join the book club. And I was like, absolutely, yes, we need to do it. And we meet up at least once a month. Though there's been some days that's been a little bit like hiccups and stuff, so we've had to move dates. For example, this weather here in Indiana is not the best, so we always have to kind of work, what's more effective for some people, because some people are pretty good distance away from where I'm from. So when we get together, we do have to kind of manage our locations, places that we want to like meet up in, that kind of stuff. But each of us get an opportunity to host in our home, and it's been phenomenal. It's been really great. I loved it. And I have to say that the reads that I'm about to show you guys, which are quite a few, I do have my little pile here and a couple of notes so I can go back and kind of remember some of the stuff that I read, though these stories are like super ingrained in my head right now. Like, they were absolutely great. There is one that it was like, so that one I'll probably talk about. But yeah, so I really, really enjoyed these reads. And I think that sometimes it's really, really good to join a book club. I highly recommend it for anybody out there. If you guys can join, whether it's an online book club or a more personal in-person kind of book club, I definitely recommend it. I know our local library here, they do offer book clubs too as well, to meet up once or twice, a month, depending. I mean, once or every 2 months. There you go. So it really depends on you if you guys are interested in that, but just look at your local libraries. They do happen to have book clubs there too as well, if you're interested in, which I'm actually debating whether to join one or not. I don't know. I'm still kind of iffy, but right now with this particular book club that I joined last year, it has been phenomenal. I've been really loving to be able to just pretty much really have a discussion about a book that we read. And the thing is, most of these books, every host pretty much gets to choose a book. And by doing so, it kind of puts you out of your comfort zone. Some of the books you probably wouldn't have picked. I know I probably wouldn't have picked. And there's other books that I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been wanting to read that book since forever. And I'm so glad it got chosen for a book club. So just join me today in showing you guys pretty much what I have read last year. Now, keep in mind, I've read so many books last year. I've been on a book slump back before I actually came back here to YouTube, but I'm talking about like before, what was it? Now, actually right after I ended up filming my last film here, I really got in a huge book run where I read, but it wasn't like a lot. And a lot of things, like I had mentioned, had happened where I had to kind of pull back a lot. But now I'm actually full force, literally since last year, just boom, 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 just reading, getting into books, especially reading books that have been in my TBR list. So I have been super excited to kind of share all the books I've read. So anyways, let's get back to this book club, book selections that I've had and my thoughts on them. The very last book that I'm going to talk about, though, really quickly, I am not going to give too much of my thoughts on it because I want to save that for the book club. We haven't been able to meet up due to weather, but very soon we are going to be meeting up, but I will talk to you guys about that. That's going to be the last book on here. But first and foremost, I wanted to talk about this one, which this is one of our first selections here. I do have my little notes. I have a little sticky note and stuff just so that I don't forget some things. But we have here the Inheritance Games. You guys guys, this, let me put my sticky note down. It's a big old bright pink sticker. But yeah, here it is, you guys, in all its little glory. So this is how the book looks. I did get the paperback version. We are able, in our book club, either try to check them out at our local library. That way we're not spending too much if you don't want to. You can get the audio book, you can get the ebook, or you can get the physical book. Sorry, my dog's over there just shaking it up. But yeah, so there is like so many options in a way that you guys can actually read your book, at least for us here in our book club. So I chose to buy the book, and oh my gosh, this book was a book I probably wouldn't have picked up. I don't know why, like never in my mind I thought to pick it up. I did hear about it, but I never once thought to pick it up and read it for some reason. And I am so freaking glad that I read it. I am telling you guys, this book is so good, and it's by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. She actually does, this is like a 3-part series, which I'm kind of thinking there might be even a 4th. So the second book to this is called The Hawthorne Legacy. And then you have The Last Gambit, I think, or was it? Oh no, The Final Gambit. There you go. And I have to say, it was riveting. It was very, very interesting. If you are somebody who really is into mazes, puzzles, secret corridors, just kind of like a lot of riddles and having to pretty much like solve riddles, this is like the type of book for you, for sure. For me, it was a little too much riddly because I almost lost myself in some of these riddles and puzzles and things like that. But nonetheless, the plot of it just really, really worked with the whole scenery and setting and everything, that I actually didn't mind it as bad as much as I would have probably thought. But yeah, so in here you have Avery Grams, and she's a high schooler. She's ready to almost finish, you know, her schooling, and she gets called to the principal's office. And pretty much she ends up realizing that she has to leave out of town because she inherited some random guys, because she didn't know who this person was, but his name was Tobias Hawthorne. He ended up passing away, and he pretty much passed on his estate to her. And he is a millionaire, billionaire, whatever he is. I mean, he has an huge mansion, and he is very, very wealthy. So she inherits his estate, and now she pretty much has to kind of protect herself to a certain extent. She has a lot of bodyguards, everything, because she is like really, really well known. And there's so much speculations with the media and everything about like her purpose in this. In other words, some of them were kind of thinking that maybe she might just be trying to take advantage of the estate and stuff like that. Anywho, there's stipulations to the will or to the trust in which she has to pretty much live in the house, in the mansion, for a whole year until she turns a certain age. And then that way, like, she can definitely inherit pretty much the estate. And while she's in there, she's also living with the grandsons, well, at least Tobias Hawthorne's grandsons, which are 3. And they are called the Hawthorns. So they are kind of in the point where some of them don't know what to think of her. They don't know if she's trying to take advantage of the situation, why their grandfather even chose her. But yeah, so there's a lot of things in here that kind of makes it a little bit more complex. And the storyline definitely thickens. And when you end up finishing this book, you're going to be like, no, it can't stop there. There has to be more, which there is. So I do recommend to read the second and third one, and it starts to really pick up. But definitely this book is more to kind of get you guys ready for what's to come in the second and third book. So this really lays that like platform out for you guys. So yeah, I definitely recommend this one. This one was, oh my gosh, so good. And our book club really, really loved it. I think we all really enjoyed it. And there was a lot of parts of it that really was like, whoa, like mind-blowing twists and turns. You didn't expect some of the stuff that happened. And yeah, it was really, really good. So that's that one. I'm going to try to hurry up because I'm already here. Oh my gosh, I'm getting like, yeah, I'm looking at my minutes and I'm like, can't believe I took that long. Okay, our second book was a selection that I chose. And I have been wanting to read this book, but I just haven't got the chance. And I want to say I ended up getting this in one of my bookish box unboxings. But this one right here is called The Widow of Pale Harbor by Hester Fox, okay? Wow. This one, I really recommend. I mean, there was a lot of actions. Even at the end, I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, like, it just, it really blew my mind with the way the author really like wrote this. And oh my gosh, it was riveting. It was really good. It was really good, you guys. So this one actually takes place in Maine, in Pale Harbor, and you have Sophronia Carver, which she's a widow, and she lives with her maid in this mansion. And now the villagers aren't too kind to her. Like, they're actually kind of mean. And they believe that she is a witch and that she killed her husband. Or they think that she had something to do with the killing of her husband. Because her husband, died, and they were just kind of like, it sounds a bit suspicious, right? Well, Sophronia, it ends up kind of having these little messages or things that happen in her estate or in the area where she lives. And a lot of them are pretty much references to Edgar Allan Poe. So there's certain things that kind of this individual or persons or whoever are doing this are kind of like almost like playing a prank on her, but they're not. They're kind of giving her these messages like, watch out, I'm watching you, I know you, these kinds of things that are very creepy, and she never understands or never knows like what's going to happen next. So she's always kind of living in fear in a way, and she doesn't want to go out. And especially her maid is always so like, you can't go out, I'll go get the stuff for you, you don't have to leave the estate, all of this stuff. So it's very overprotective of her, which sometimes you kind of feel like, that's a little suspicious, right? But I don't want to say more than that, because yeah, this one just has a lot of twists and turns, to be honest with you guys. So then you have Gabriel Stone. He comes from Massachusetts, I believe, and turns out his wife passed away, and he kind of wanted just a whole new start. That's what he wants. So he decides to be a minister because he realizes they were looking for a minister here in Pale Harbor. They had a chapel and they wanted someone to kind of take care of it. So he ended up coming in. And when he came in, it's kind of like him getting to know Sophronia and this elite kind of group and going to all these events, and things start to happen, and he's realizing things are happening, especially around Sophronia, where he doesn't know what to make of it. He doesn't know if it's her who's doing this stuff or if it's somebody else, but things are just getting very creepy and just starts to build. And once it builds, things are happening more and more and more, and it starts to get very like, whew. And I don't want to say any more about that, but this is pretty much what the story is about. And I have to say, this is a 10 out of 10. This was another book that I really enjoyed. I love the references. I like how it ended. Everything was just like, whew, like, oh my, there was even moments where I was like, no, like, oh, da, da, da. Like, I mean, it got you literally on your feet. This was phenomenal. Great read. Now, another read. This one was the one that was a little rough on me. So I'm going to get my other sticky notes, because for the rest of them, for the rest of the 3 or whatever, I will put a picture somewhere here of the book that I'm going to talk about. And this one in particular was a rough one. This was the very first book in our book club that I just couldn't get through it. I just couldn't. There was no way I was going to, with my past history of just, trauma and things that happened in my childhood, as well as what I've seen growing up, that I just could not get past the first chapter. Yeah, it was rough. It was rough. So that book was called A Child Called It, and it was by Dave Peltzer. And I kind of have my notes here because I have to look at it. But this book is more like, it was given to more like social / medical kind of field, like when you're going into that educational field and you're going to college. And this is kind of a book that they would give you to read up on, kind of like a case study in a way. And there's a lot of like iffiness about this book, because some people believe that it's not a true story. Some people believe that it is based on a true story. Nonetheless, the way the author wrote this book, it was way too realistic for me. That really just like, oh my God, I'm talking about my anxiety, my like clamminess of my hands. It was a little too much. And I'm very open to reading a variety of different types of books, to be honest with you guys. But this type of book just really just hit a little too close for home for my liking. And I decided I just couldn't continue to read it. I just couldn't. It was really, really difficult. I was willing to still go to the book club probably, but I knew the type of discussion that it was going to be, and it was going to be really hard. I personally go to therapy myself, and there's a lot of reasons for it, but it's a lot. And I've even had to talk to my therapist about this. This is crazy. This is how intense this book was, you guys. So I think that if you're someone who really went through abuse or have seen abuse or anything in regards to that type of subject, this probably isn't the book for you. I know it wasn't the book for me, and it's okay. You know, it's not all the books can be. But this one in particular was about a boy who goes to school, and pretty much the staff there are realizing there's some very suspicious things, that they realize that this child is getting physically abused. You know, he comes with bruises in his body, and pretty much the state is starting to now get involved in it and what happens during this whole process. That first chapter really puts you into a certain scenario that happened to this kid and what his mother did to him, and it broke my heart. It just broke my heart so much that I had to just step back. It was so much just physical abuse that I just could not handle for my just for myself, right? So this is a book I can't really speak too much on because I didn't go on ahead and read the rest of it, but the first chapter alone just already just took me. And yeah, I know there's like a second book to this called The Lost Boy, which I also didn't read. But yeah, I'm sad to say that this was a book that was just a no-go for me. So that was really sad. That was really sad. But I don't know what the discussion was in particular to that one because I didn't go to the discussion for this particular book. But yeah, that was just one of the books that I just couldn't get through, and having a discussion of it was even because you know, I also worked at a place which some would consider kind of orphanage almost, or a foster kind of place, and I would see some really like children that would come into this facility that we would take care of. That was just so heartbreaking. And sometimes the love that you give and the care that you give to these kids is all they probably had in them growing up. And I worked there for a little over a year, and it was you really have to have a good state of mind to work at a facility like that. And the work that was done there was just absolutely amazing for these kids. It was definitely something that these children needed, some love and care that they definitely lacked in their homes. So it was very hard. This is why it just hits way too home for me, and it just wasn't the book for me. Now, the book that we read after that was actually called Snapdragon, and it was by Kat Leah. And the cat, yeah, Leah, something like that. So here's the thing with that book. I have been looking in my bookshelves everywhere, over there, like even upstairs in my room, and I cannot find the book. And I'm wondering if I let somebody borrow it and I just didn't get it back or what. But that's a book that I would reread, which means I definitely need to have it, right? Like I need to have it in my collection. But I am looking at my bookshelves, and I'm telling you guys, I spent like half an hour just looking for this book that I could not find. So sadly, I don't have this book, but it is a graphic novel book. It was our very first graphic novel that we did here in our book club, and it was a great read. Now, this book was one of those books that was in my TBR. That was a book that I really, really wanted to read, but I didn't know if I was going to have time to read it, or it's just like time would get like past me, right? But finally, I got to read this book, and you guys, loved it. There's so much magicalness in there. And there's pretty much this girl called Snapdragon, and she has like something about her is like magical, but she doesn't realize, she doesn't uncover it yet. And she ends up meeting this person that in her neighborhood, they considered this person a witch. And so when you first meet this person, you also don't know if it's a witch or not. But there is some kind of quirkiness to this particular individual. And pretty much what happens is that Snapdragon starts to get really interested and wants to kind of help. And she wanted to find her dog, which went missing. And turns out her dog was in this location of this so-called witch, right? So she ends up getting her dog back. And the thing is, she was so fearless. Like, she was not like anytime like scared or anything like that of this person. She was very strong-willed, which I love. I love a character that shows someone who is very strong-willed and brave. But yeah, it's all the story about how she helps this individual with animals, because turns out that this witch goes and picks up pretty much dead carcasses off the road. You know, like if you were to call, you know, animal control to come like, hey, you know, an animal got hit on the road, they would go and pick it up. Well, this particular individual will do that. And after that, story gets more complex. But Snapdragon does meet a friend, and I love the development of the friend too as well, and how Snapdragon doesn't judge this friend. And it's so good, because he also starts to discover himself. And then eventually Snapdragon realizes that she might have more magic in her than she probably knew. So yeah, that was really good too. So if you guys want to pick that up, I definitely highly recommend it. Now, this is a book that is very LGBTQ plus, you know, friendly. So if that's something you guys are into, you guys can definitely read that. But I love the storyline. I loved everything about it. It was very heartwarming, which is something I really needed in that moment. So I recommend that book. 10 out of 10 also. All right. And now the next book. Oh my gosh. This was a book that I definitely never would have thought that I would be actually doing, to be honest with you guys. This is a book that I was like, whoa, like I wouldn't have picked it up, but it was so good that I did. It definitely opened up your eyes to just kind of like the way the author really brought you into the story. It was like, wow, this is how really things were in those times. But it's called The Kitchen House, for those who may not know, and it's by Kathleen Grissom. So she pretty much writes this book about Lavina, and Lavina is an Irish little girl, and she ends up getting sold to this master. Lavina ends up pretty much getting brought into this home. You do have Belle, who takes care of her and kind of puts her on her wing. And she's also one of the ones that are pretty much like a slave. And she ends up taking care also of the house and of the master's wife and everything that they do growing up. And it does kind of give you into perspective how a lot of immigrants and a lot of slaves that were also Irish, you know, what they had to go through too. Yeah, it's a very sad situation, but eventually things start to develop, and this thing, oh my gosh, all the way to the very end, it really builds up. And it is, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil the book for you guys, but it is a very good book. And this one also has a follow-up book too, which has two other characters that were also in the main book. And it kind of follows them through their journey, because something happens at the very end, and it's just what they end up doing and their life pretty much moving forward. And that's called Glory Over Everything, which I'll put that book up here somewhere just so that you guys can see which one that is. But yeah, it's all about living in a plantation and things that have happened during that period of time. So that was very interesting. So that was the book. And then we had another book, which that book was just wow. And that is this. It's called La Hacienda. Now, I got the Spanish book of this one. Honestly, I kind of ordered it by mistake. I wanted the English version. And then when it came in, I realized it was in Spanish. And I was like, dang it. But it's okay. I was reading this one because I do speak Spanish. I am bilingual. I can read, write, and speak Spanish. I grew up in a very Hispanic kind of household, so that was actually my first language. So I was able to read this. And it's by Isabel Cañas, and it's called La Hacienda. So this book is a very spooky book. So if you're into a type of book that is very like, not necessarily gory, but very, gosh, what can I say? It has a lot of ghost aspects and poltergeist, or what do they call that? Or demonic kind of things that happen in this book that you're like, whoa, right? And there's even parts where it's almost like you're like, zoom, zoom, like you're kind of getting transported into what's going on here, and it really feels like you're actually going through it with the characters. It gets crazy. It's really good, very well written. But this actually takes place in an hacienda. An hacienda, it's kind of like a plantation also, except back in Mexico. And this is pretty much the setting is there. But here you actually have Beatriz. She ends up losing her father, and she's now well-to-do. So she's struggling financially. Her mother and her are kind of struggling, but she ends up meeting someone who's very financially stable and actually very rich. So he owns his own mansion and stuff, and he meets her, and he pretty much marries her. And so Beatriz now ends up married to Rodolfo. And he ends up taking her to his hacienda, and she now lives in this huge mansion, which is kind of run down a little bit. And while she's living there on the outhouse, on a more, or at least another house that's kind of close to that house, the sister of Rodolfo lives there. And her name is not Beatriz. What was it? Beatriz is the original one who got married to Rodolfo. But the other one, what's her name? Her name was Juana. There you go. I almost lost the name. But her name is Juana, and she's the sister, and she's kind of a bitter sister, to be honest with you. But she lives with her maid, and they don't want to step foot in the hacienda, in the actual house, in the mansion, which is a little bit run down. But Beatriz kind of tries to make this home her home and realize there's kind of some odd things that are happening into her house. She starts to hear voices, and the voices become louder. And then things start happening in the night that really starts to get very creepy. And she realizes that maybe it might have something to do with Rodolfo's ex-wife, which passed away. So Rodolfo's the actual widower. And it's pretty much something is happening in the story. She now wants to uncover what happened to his ex-wife, because she's starting to feel that maybe she might have the same fate. And so, yeah, so things start to happen in here. And then eventually there is a priest that comes in, and because she asked for a priest to come in and kind of bless her home. And she starts to explain what she's experiencing. And the head priest didn't want to hear it. Didn't want to believe her, told her to be quiet, and was really kind of demeaning to her, to be honest with you. But back in the days, that's kind of how they felt. Like, you know, the men had this superiority over women, and it was like women had to be shut down, and yeah, it was very that. But then there's another kind of priest who is just up and coming. He's very youthful, and his name is Andres. So this pastor pretty much comes in and actually under the table tries to help her. So in this hacienda, they do have a capilla, which is pretty much like an off-site chapel, which the community kind of uses there at the hacienda, at the plantation. And pretty much Andres starts to do masses there as an excuse to kind of get in there and try to bless and try to exorcise this home, because this home has so much like demonic kind of situations happening to it. And he realizes that in able to help Beatriz, he needs to go in and bless her house and do all kinds of things. So things start to get worse before other things happen. So that's all I'm going to say about this book. Very, very interesting, to say the least. And yeah, so this is kind of the story about Beatriz and her dealings, and how she deals with Andres, and how Andres tries to help her, and how Rodolfo is not the husband she thought he might be. That's all I can say. It's really good, you guys. Really, really good. I recommend that book. So yeah. Okay. So now I'm running out of time. This video is getting way too long. But the one book that I'm not going to speak too much on my opinion is actually this book called The Poison Heart, which is an Owl Crate book subscription book that I actually got. The original book does look a little bit different than this. So the cover does look a little different. But yeah, it's called The Poison Heart by Kayleen Bayron. Bayron? Yeah, I think I said it right. So this book actually follows Beatriz and Brises. I'm getting it confused with that book I just read, you guys. I mean, that I just talked about La Hacienda. But Brises, I believe that's her name. She actually has a gift. She can grow plants and flowers and vines and all kinds of things. And for some reason, whenever she walks anywhere near a plant or a tree, they tend to kind of lean towards her. So I think that's really, really exciting. And because I love plants, I like don't kill plants as much, because before I used to do that a lot, but now I'm starting to have a green thumb, you guys. So I thought this was a really great read to add to our book club, and I was going to host it. We just haven't had a chance to get together because of the weather. It has been pretty bad here in Indiana, like I said before. But yeah, this story kind of pretty much starts off as Brises. She's at a flower shop that her mother owns, and they're kind of living almost paycheck to paycheck. And her landlord right now is just hiring up the fee for the monthly kind of rent, and it's getting more and more difficult for her family to kind of stay there. And her family's now realizing, like, especially her parents are realizing, like, what are we gonna do? So yeah, so that's kind of what this book is about. But she has that gift of growing things, and it turns out that pretty much they get notified that her aunt, who she didn't even know about, but she had an aunt that has this estate and pretty much ends up passing it to Breeze's. So they end up going and checking out this estate and realizing whether they're going to be interested in taking it or not. They kind of move in, want to know more about the location, and she ends up realizing, Breeze's ended up realizing, that there's kind of this poison garden in the backyard, and nothing happens to Breeze's. She realizes that she's not as affected by these plants as much as you would think, but I don't want to say too much about that because I don't want to spoil the book too much. But in this location and in this estate, there is kind of this apothecary office, and people come and go to this apothecary to get certain herbs and things like that, which Breeze's ends up kind of doing now. So yeah, it's pretty much what happens there and who took her to this estate, and things start to not be as what you think. A lot of things starts happening where this story definitely develops, and you realize, like, is Breeze's and her family in danger or not? And it definitely starts picking up. So I don't want to say my opinion on this yet. I probably will say it in the end of the year kind of book club book group that I end up doing again, where I get all the books and I want to talk to you guys about what our book club has read. But I'll probably tell you guys more about my opinion about this. But oh my gosh, I definitely think that you might want to read it and form your own thoughts. I'm sorry I'm not giving you guys too much about this. It's a very interesting read, and I think what I got to say for sure is I do love the character of Breeze's. So that I do have to say. So anyways, that is all the books that we had here in our book club. Actually, not here, but you know what I mean, like in the book club that I am in. But yeah, what do you guys think? Have you guys read some of these books that I've actually mentioned? What are your thoughts? And what are some books that you guys probably recommend for me to read? Because right now I am taking any recommendations, and I may or may not read it and possibly review it here and maybe talk about it. So yeah. All right, you guys, sorry that I made this video a little too long. I hope you guys stuck until the end. And I'm sorry that I'm looking here and I'm also looking there. I just like, yeah, the camera. It's the way the camera is set up, you guys. But I hope everyone has a wonderful, day today and week. I'm going to try to put more, like I said, videos up, but just kind of be patient with me as I get into the groove of things now. And yeah, you guys, so that has been my reads. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, you guys, toodles.